Hi, everybody, and welcome to our general election special session today. It's all about how to get food on your local election, on your candidate's agenda. My name is, I will introduce myself and others here, and then I'll share a bit about our agenda today. So my name is Vera Zakharov. I am based at Sustain, and I work on the Sustainable Food Places program as the local action coordinator. I am joined by my colleagues, Sophia Parent, who is the head of local action for Sustain, who also works with SFP, and you guys will be quite familiar with her. I'm also joined by my colleagues, Lily Omara Adembesa, who is the local action officer as well for Sustainable Food Places, as well as Ollie Ratcliffe, who is our Parliamentary and Public Affairs Officer at Sustain. And we're also joined here by Sophie Patterson from Food Plymouth, who's going to be our food partnership speaker today. So firstly, I will share our screen, and you can take a look at the agenda. There we go. So hopefully everyone can see that. Before we dive, there we go. But before we dive into it, I just want to remind everybody or let people know that Sustain and Sustainable Food Places, we commit ourselves to ensuring that our events and sessions are inclusive, respectful spaces. We do not tolerate discrimination of any kind. We ask that you are respectful of one another, respectful of one another's views and different perspectives, and that you avoid using colloquial or outdated language. If there is anything, if there's any issue at all, please contact myself, Sophia, Ollie, or Lily, and we will be there to support you. Also, do feel free to use the chat. But yeah, we just want to remind everybody that this is a respectful space, and we are here to make sure to support you in any way we can. Also, I do believe that hopefully there's closed captioning option. So if you need to turn that on, please do. So our agenda for today, I've already done the first bit, our welcome. So after I'm done speaking, I will pass on the space to Ollie, who will take you through our general election toolkit. Followed by that, Sophie will come in with a bit more about what they're doing in Food Plymouth ahead of the general election. Then we will have a Q&A for both Ollie and Sophie, and really all of us here from the SFP and Sustain teams. And then we will go into small breakout groups where you will have a chance to discuss any opportunities and challenges coming up for you, your thoughts on the assets, as well as any plans you have or any concerns that you might have going forward in the next few weeks. And then we will come back together for a close. And just as a reminder, the session is recorded today. So of course, we will be sharing both the session recording and the presentations. So with that, I will stop share and bring on the space for Ollie. So Ollie, go ahead and share your screen.
Thank you very much, Vera. Okay, so share my screen. Okay, can you see that okay? Can you see?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Cheers. Okay, thank you, everyone, and it's lovely to be here. So as Vera said, I'm Ollie from the Public Affairs team at Sustain, and very excited to talk you through this very exciting time that we are in, of course, the build-up to the big general election on July the 4th. So we've created this toolkit to help you, energize you, give you the information you need to get in contact with some of your local candidates. So this toolkit applies to pre-election, of course, for the next few weeks, but a lot of the learnings you'll find in here will also be very applicable to just after the election and throughout the year as well. So it's a long-term toolkit, but of course, lots of the information is on the pre-election period. So I'm just going to talk you through it today, and I'm happy to take some questions at the end. So here's what this toolkit looks like. So I'll talk you just through each bit in turn. So we've obviously got the introduction, the Sustain manifesto, setting a bit of context for the general election itself. I'll talk you through the timeline, the lobbying rules and campaigning, why you should do it in the first place, and what an MP can do for you, and then some more of the nitty-gritty tips of how to get involved, and identifying the calls to action, identifying and getting to know your MP, and then we have some, hopefully some very useful template letters and template hustings questions for you to get your teeth stuck into as well. And of course, some final thoughts on congratulating the new MP, and of course some information on devolved administrations. So that's what the toolkit contains. So first of all is our first page is just on the Sustain main asks. So when you're sort of rallying your main asks together, do take a look at the Sustain manifesto. We've pulled it together from all of our different campaigns, which cover lots of the areas that you'll be covering locally. So that could be, you can see on the right there, it could be on agroecological farming, it could be on healthy school food, expansion of healthy starts, and we have quite a lot more information in our manifesto itself on those particular asks. So I do recommend you having a look at the manifesto. So I'll just take you through to some of the context. So I'm sure it hasn't escaped you that the gravity of this general election it's a pretty big one. We're expecting a hefty number of new faces descending into Parliament. It's expected between 250 to potentially up to 400 new MPs in Westminster, which is pretty staggering. It's one of the biggest sea change elections that we've had in a lot of our lifetime. So a lot of new faces coming into Parliament on the 4th of July. Very quick basics. Obviously, the 650 MPs across the UK use the first past the post system. So that's essentially winner takes all, no prizes for second place. It's the winner takes all for each seat. And I did put a link in there to some of the boundary changes that have happened this year. So there was a review of a lot of the boundaries and constituencies last year. So you will probably find that your seat has a different name now, and possibly covers a slightly different area. It won't be too drastically different, but obviously it might have a different name. So do check out the boundary changes to familiarize yourself with the different sort of names changes and things. So what that does mean is that, and this goes for before the boundary changes as well, that some local authorities might not match perfectly with the name of the constituency. So just bear that in mind. Some of you might be dealing with a couple of constituencies at once as well, so your area might cover across 2 different seats. So just bear that in mind and just familiarize yourself. And obviously, if you do have the time capacity to engage with more than one seat, obviously we would encourage you to do so. So it's not a perfect fit between local authorities and Westminster seats. If only it was, but it's not. In terms of MP standing down, I've put a link in there here to, you can see the list. So if you are wondering, all of them have been announced now. So all of the candidates were finalized last week. So if you're wondering where your MP has gone, they've probably stepped down if they're not to be seen on the candidate sheet. So over 100 have said that they're standing down this year. So when I said there was quite a big amount of changes, so a lot of quite big names in the Westminster world have actually decided to stand down. So do check that out if you're unfamiliar at this point. So obviously, with it being such a huge election, we can't express enough how important it is to engage now. I think it's the perfect time to engage with this new crop of MPs. There's going to be lots of new faces, lots of hungry MPs ready to meet their local constituents and local areas. So this summer is a really crucial summer, and beyond summer as well, to engaging with Parliament. So timeline. So I've got some key dates here, and some of them are still TBC, just FYI, because it's a bit of a moving feast at the moment. But obviously, you'll be aware that we're in Purdah at the moment, which means the pre-election period, which essentially means that the slate is completely wiped clean. No MPs are currently MPs, so all candidates are on an equal footing to one another. And until the 4th of July, we will remain in this period. So essentially, only if your MP is in a government position, they will still be having to do very basic restricted government activity. So if they're a Secretary of State, for example, but it's very, very restricted. So 99.9% of them are no longer MPs. So just to go through some of the key dates, you might already be aware that this week is Manifesto Week. I'm sure you've seen in the news. Obviously, the Lib Dems announced their manifesto yesterday. So if you would like to check that out, I would highly recommend. The Conservatives have announced their manifesto this morning at 11 o'clock. The Green Party is tomorrow, and we've got the Labour Party on Thursday as well. So this is very much Manifesto Week, and you'll see all over the news lots of grilling of the party leaders of their manifesto pledges. So obviously you know about 4th of July being election day. Now just the post-election dates this is where the TBCs sort of come in a bit, but this is what we have been drawn to believe at the moment and what's out there at the moment. So 9th of July is when the newly elected MPs will meet in Parliament for the first time. So the period between the 4th and the 9th of July is basically when MPs will be getting laptops and getting their desks and their staffers and things. There'll be lots of headless chickens running around Westminster in that time. So very busy time, and they won't actually be sitting until the 9th. And then 17th of July, this is now confirmed, I believe. So it was TBC when we wrote the toolkit, but this will be the state opening of Parliament, so the King's speech, which is where the King essentially announces all of the primary legislation for the year. So that's essentially bills, big commitments that the government plans to do for the next year. So that look out for that, and that will really give us a flavour of the direction of travel of whoever the government might be. So that's 17th of July. And then that takes you into the next bit of July, which is the 23rd of July. I think this is still TBC, but we usually would go for a summer recess. So we'd usually have a summer holidays. It's pretty in time with the school holidays. And it's usually end of July until early September, but there is talk of it being shortened this year. So it could be a later start in July, and then there has been rumours that they could come back after the August bank holiday. So right at the end of August. So it will probably still be about a month off, but it could be a little bit more condensed this year. But that is still to be confirmed, and that will probably, well, we won't know any more about that until the new government are in place. So in terms of timings for engagements, of course, you've got the pre-election period now, which is I've already mentioned is a perfect time to engage with candidates. But obviously in July, just be aware of how patchy it is. It's a very busy month, especially at the start. And obviously when they're getting their desks and things and finding their feet, it might not be the best time. But summer recess, I would say, is a good time to engage with them. Hopefully they would have got their feet under the desk at that point, staff and officers in place, and actually it would be a good time to engage with them. And they will probably be working a little bit more this summer than they would in normal summers. Usually they'll be off to the south of France or something, but this year I can imagine a lot of the new crop will be quite interested in hearing from constituents. So don't be put off by the summer recess. And then lastly, party conference season starts on the 14th of September to the 2nd of October. Again, I wouldn't write off engaging in this time, but just bear in mind, especially this year, they're going to be very busy at this time. So just if you're sending emails and trying to get in contact with them in those dates, just bear in mind they're probably at party conference. So just bear that in mind. Okay, so that's it for the timeline. Rules for lobbying. I won't go into too much detail, but there are links here that you can find on the Electoral Commission website. In terms of lobbying rules, I've got to say most of it is common sense. Most of you will be aware of the lobbying rules. I would just say the main things are to stay out of party politics, stick to the issues that you're talking about, and don't endorse individuals, don't give too much bias to individuals, and make lots of clear endorsements for personalities rather than the issues. I think all of you will be aware of that, but just be mindful that just stay put on the issues rather than personalities. And I think, yeah, I think most of you will already be aware of that, but just bear in mind. And in terms of inviting cross-party, you don't have to invite every single candidate who's standing in your area. I mean, you could organise a meeting with the Monster Raving Looming Party if you really wanted to, but there's some of the smaller candidates maybe that you absolutely don't have to. But obviously the main parties, especially the top 2 or 3, that you have a good idea that will be in your seats, I would say they're good people to engage with, but you don't absolutely have to go for absolutely everyone. There's sometimes quite a lot of candidates. I'm going to stop on lobbying for now, but do ask me any more questions and get in touch if you do have any queries on that. Just very quickly on this, again, I'm not going to go into too much detail here, but we did do a session specifically on engaging your MPs outside of election time, which I'll come to the link in a minute. But, you know, the important question is why? Why is this important? What can an MP do for you? And obviously, you know, getting to know who your MP is, whether they're a backbencher, whether they're on a shadow team, whether they're a government minister, is all very important to know, and how much they can actually do for you. But most of the time, and most of you will have a backbench MP, so they'll be sitting behind the government or sitting behind the shadow team. And of course, they'll be able to speak up for you in debates, ask parliamentary questions for you, propose new legislation on your behalf. They'll be able to open lots of doors for you. So they're really, really useful contacts to have. And I'm sure a lot of you are aware of that. And just a little, don't forget, they're often described as the GPs of the political world. They have a very good broad knowledge, but they're certainly not experts in any fields, really, to be honest. But most of the time, I would say MPs are just looking for things to say. And they're looking for things to say from people like you, and you're the fountains of information for them. So just bear that in mind. It's going to move on to the next bit. So these is some of the more nitty-gritty tips now for engaging with candidates. So first thing is to really get your ducks in a row on your calls to action. You know, looking up what your main priorities are as a food partnership or whatever organization you're from, and not having a really long shopping list is quite important. So having like a really short and sweet condensed list of asks that you want to prioritize with that MP or that candidate, rather than showering them with lots of different asks that you have and bombarding them. They're going to be meeting a lot of people, to just bear that in mind. So you have to be quite focused on what you want to put on the table for them. And as I said, use the Sustain manifesto, use the Sustain resources at your disposal to help you with any of that. In terms of identifying them, we would always recommend They Work For You websites. For any of you who've been to these sessions before, we always push that really hard. It's a fantastic resource for finding out about what your MP has said. This is obviously if your MP is a existing MP. If they're a completely new MP candidates, I'll come on to that. But obviously the Parliament website, if that have a look at what they've said in previous debates in the past. Now, PPCs are prospective parliamentary candidates. So these are obviously everyone that's out there at the moment, but some of them could be completely new faces. And obviously, in terms of researching who they are, we've got two links there for the Democracy Club and Who Can I Vote For. And on that, they have an up-to-date list of all of the candidates, and they even have their backgrounds. They even have emails for the candidates on Democracy Club and Who Can I Vote For. So it saves you loads of time looking for the candidate details and a bit of information about them. So do check that out, and that is absolutely a critical resource for you. As I said, yeah, goes without saying, research their interests, have a look at their website. All of them will have their own campaign website right now. So do just familiarize yourself with that, follow them on Twitter, and do check out what they're pledging to be behind at the moment. Okay, just going to move on to the candidates. So we've got an appendix with a template letter for candidates, which I'll show you in a second. But yeah, just another reminder to write all the main party candidates. Don't just do the ones that you think might win. You still never know what's going to happen. Obviously, we all have a good idea of who's going to win, but your seats could be a swing seat, so it really is hard to predict some of them. So do write to the main party candidates. Now, hustings. Now, hustings they traditionally take place obviously within the next few weeks just before an election. They often take place in places like churches and local halls and things, village halls, whatever. But I think a lot of them are actually taking place online now, I think, and some of them are taking place on Facebook Live and things. So they're getting very up to date with the times. But do have a look again at websites, the Democracy Club, to see when the hustings are announced. You can also Google if there's a hustings in your area, if there's any local groups hosting it. Environmental organisations such as Friends of the Earth and things like that often do hustings on obviously environmental issues, so do check out if they're doing one in your area. And we absolutely urge you to go along and participate. Often you have to submit questions in advance through writing to the organisers, or there could be scope for you actually asking questions at the time. And it's just a really interactive, buzzing event. I'm sure some of you have been to them before, but really good way of getting to meet the new candidates and obviously putting a face to the name. I'm actually seeing them in person. So can't recommend going to hustings enough. In terms of site visits as well, so this is something which, you know, you might not have time to organise pre-election. I appreciate it's only a few weeks until the 4th of July, but this is something you can absolutely do in the summer after the election. So we can help you with that. We've done, you know, we know people have done things like that in the past. So obviously this summer could be quite an interesting time for a site visit. That could be coming to visit a local business, coming to visit Food Partnership itself, a local farm, a local growing community, something, anything you want. You can come and vote, invite your MP to this summer at some point. Of course, vote. I think you all know the importance of that. And when it comes to the 4th of July, do congratulate the newly elected MP. As I said, that week just after the election will be a bit crazy, but I would get the congratulatory letter at least off in July. And then in terms of if you wanted to do a site visit or something that's all more meaningful, you can organise that for after July. But in terms of a congratulation letter, there's nothing to stop you just from doing that and then following up with something with a bit more to it a bit later down the line. But absolutely congratulating the candidates is a really good way of getting your name out there. In terms of getting to know your candidates, your new MP, this is just post 4th of July now. Again, obviously stalk them on Twitter, look at their website, and the maiden speeches are always on YouTube as well. So they'll be making their first speech in Parliament in early July. So do check out what your new MP is saying in that speech on YouTube. Okay, so as I said, the session that we did, which was a deep dive into all of the engagement tips for your MP, is here. So do check out that link. And now for devolved administrations, very quickly, as a lot of you will know, food and farming and health and things is a devolved issue, but obviously you can check out more information there. And obviously a lot of these tips still apply to engaging with your local MSP and things. But don't be put off by engaging with your Westminster MP, because it will often be a bridge between the two parliaments. And here, lastly, is the template letter to candidates. I'll just let you have a look at that. Obviously, you can edit as you see fit, but we've got quite a lot of information in there for you. And lastly, template key questions to candidates. This is if you do get yourself to a hustings, whether that's in person or online. We've got some questions for you to fire out if you'd like, and maybe a little bit of tailoring to your area here. You can see some of these questions, but hopefully that's enough fuel for your fire in the next few weeks. And I'm happy to answer any questions shortly. So thank you. I'll stop there.
Thank you so much, Ollie. Let's, in the interest of time, let's actually go straight to Sophie, if that's okay, and then we'll just combine the questions for both speakers. Is that okay with you, Sophie?
Yeah, that's absolutely fine. I'll bring
Wonderful.
my screen share up now.
Thanks so much.
Okay, great. Hopefully you can all see that okay. Brilliant. So I'm just offering really a bit of a personal take on what's happening in Plymouth. And I will say, as a food partnership coordinator, it's all new to me. So it's really just trying to share what we're thinking about doing, and also trying to encourage everybody else to think about doing things similarly as well. So a little bit of background first of all. Plymouth, we've got 3 constituencies, 21 candidates in total, and we've got 24 days to go to the election. And that obviously might be a different story for quite a few from the call. You might be a county level food partnership with loads and loads of candidates and constituencies to contend with, or you might be similarly to Plymouth, a small city as well. So hopefully I'll cater a little bit for everybody in this presentation. So a little bit of background as well about the previous engagement that we've had. It's mainly centred around the Sustainable Food Places Day of Celebration and Action. We were really pleased to have engagement from some, not necessarily all, of our MPs in 2022 and 2023. And we had, of course, just prior to the general election announcement, sent out our lovely tailored invitations to MPs for the 2024 event as well. So actually, they, you know, have had some very recent communication from us. We've also engaged around key issues over the last couple of years, including the cost of living crisis, the household support fund, and Healthy Start as well. So there's been a fairly regular sort of drip feed of email correspondence and a few in-person connections as well. So, well, what have we tried to do first of all? I think the most important thing we've tried to do is mobilise our network, our partnership and network across the entire city. We were lucky as well. We had a bit of sort of a head start with this because of the upcoming Day of Action. We, in our spring partnership meeting on the 26th of April, we were able to invite our partners there to share what their key issues were for MPs, thinking that we'd then be able to take this forward in a July event. But actually, it's the perfect solution as well. We've now got a list of key issues ready to present to candidates. And the sort of issues which have come up for us include junk food advertising restrictions, extending food curriculum in the national curriculum, and strengthening local food procurement as well. So a whole range of things which have come up from our partnership. And also it's been interesting to note quite a few sort of localised issues within that which actually the local authority would be, you know, best placed to actually deal with. But again, I think that's showing that connection between MPs potentially being able to sort of have that sort of pressure potentially as well, feeding down into local authority level as well. So interesting to see what the understanding is really of how local and national food policy work interacts. So yeah, really interesting to note that. So I would say, yeah, definitely mobilise your network, find out what are the key issues that matter to them. We were able to ask our network in person, but I also have an online survey as well, which is live at the moment. So we're just trying to get all of the possible responses in every possible way. It may be that you haven't got time to do that, or you don't have capacity to do that at the moment. So of course, as a food partnership and other organisations working in the food space, you probably already have a good understanding of what the key issues are. So you'll also be able to draw on your existing knowledge. So once you've identified your questions, of course, you need to ask them in every possible way that you can. And again, I'm probably repeating a lot of what Ollie has already said with the toolkit here. But I think the first port of call will be to email questions to our candidates. And I know that several of them in Plymouth are really quite responsive on that front from what I've seen already. But we can also, of course, tag them on social media. Quite a lot of them are quite active on Twitter, on Facebook. It feels a little bit more direct to do that, and perhaps it feels less comfortable for people if you're writing an email that's just going to them. If you're tagging them in a social media post, obviously everyone can see it, and it does feel quite direct. But at the same time, that's also an opportunity as well for other members of the public, other people using social media, to become aware of the food partnership and the work that you're doing. So it's a win-win from that perspective. We've seen quite a few of our candidates using Facebook Live events as well. I don't know if other people have seen that happening, but it means that you've got a chance to ask a question without being there in person at hustings, for example. So again, we're hoping to take advantage of those opportunities. And we will be keeping an eye on actual in-person events as well. It may be that you don't have capacity to join in person as well, these events. And that's again where you can help, you know, your network members can hopefully help with that and possibly pose a question on your behalf as the food partnership too. So don't be afraid to ask for help from your networks. And of course, we're hoping that we're going to get answers to our questions when they come in. And it's really important that we keep track of those and that we also share that with our partnership and network as well. So that could be via a dedicated newsletter, a blog post, which we constantly update as responses come in. And that's going to be really useful for future accountability and reminding our candidates of what they might have said at any of these events or in response to our emails. So lots to keep track of, we hope. And of course, you might not have much time, or you might be faced with absolutely loads of constituencies that you need to kind of keep abreast of. And it might be really feeling quite daunting right now. So I would say, you know, as Ollie said, the most important and most effective way probably is going to be emailing your candidates. And that could be, you know, just one thing that you do, but it will still certainly count for something. Using social media, you know, it's fairly quick, fairly easy. Again, if you're short on time, that's something to potentially prioritize. And again, just sourcing that support from your wider network as well. You're not, you know, going to be alone in wanting to reach out to candidates. So it may be that you can share the load as well. Staying up to date is really important as well. I've managed to follow most of the candidates on Facebook, and you know, you sort of have to brace yourself for the deluge of posts that you're going to have over the next month. But it does mean that you can keep up to date with where they're going to be, if they're going to be holding any online events, in-person events as well. So, and it also gives you a bit of a indication of the issues which are important to them, and also important to their potential voters as well. So yeah, I would encourage you to do that if you can bear it. And of course, there's the manifestos as well, which Ollie touched on earlier. And I would say, don't feel disheartened if you don't get a response, or if things are taking a little bit of time. Obviously, time is tight, but you know, all the engagement that happens is going to help raise awareness. You know, even if you don't have a response, and particularly with social media activity, you're not only going to be, you know, liaising with your candidates, but you're going to be reaching a wider audience of people who are also watching their social media as well. So again, hopefully really useful to raise awareness of your food partnership or your food organisation along the way. Post-election, definitely continue the conversation. We're hoping to organise a food tour, again, something that Ollie mentioned. I had hoped to maybe organise something before the election itself, but yeah, time is tight. So I'm envisaging that this will be something that we do afterwards. And again, you know, meeting in person is a great thing to do. It could be one of your network meetings, invite them along. And also, I think it's a chance to really cement the date for the November Day of Celebration and Action in their minds, in their diaries, hopefully. So yeah, I guess take the opportunity to do that as well. And I thought as well it's worth mentioning about the unsuccessful candidates, because it may be that actually you've had some really great interest and response from candidates who ultimately don't go on to be your MP. And I think it's still really useful to stay in touch with them as well, and they may still be able to champion your work as a local food partnership. So don't forget them. And hopefully, you know, use this whole experience as a chance to broaden your network, broaden your connections, and just, you know, be able to bring the work that you're doing to a wider audience, regardless of how much engagement you get from your candidates, I would say. So I will end it there. There's a few contact details if anybody wants to get in touch. Thanks very much.
Oh, fantastic. Thank you so much, Sophie. That was brilliant. It certainly kind of brought up some interesting questions for me, but I think like the takeaway is that any kind of engagement is positive, and it's an opening of the door. So just to kind of go for it, even if you have very limited time. And it's an interesting point about candidates that engage with this process but aren't successful may potentially be local champions. It's a really interesting point. So it's really interesting to kind of end on that, you know, there are so many ways that this type of work can be effective and supportive of your food partnership. So we're just a little bit over time, but I definitely want to have space for questions for Ollie and Sophie, just in general. And, you know, please do put questions in the chat. But otherwise, this is a great opportunity. Just raise your hand and you can come in and ask it live. So I will reserve my own questions for later, but want to cede the floor to you guys. By the way, if you can't find the raise hand function, you can always just unmute yourself and say, hi, I have a question. So don't worry. I think we're a kind of supportive, friendly space here. But if there aren't any questions, I actually have a couple, if that's all right. Or Ollie, you have a question, go for it.
Not a question, more a very quick comment. Just I really like
Yeah.
Sophie's comment about making notes of what they promise in this period. I think that's really critical to remember, because that's how you're going to hold them to account. And that's what they're the issues that you know, you're going to hold their feet to the fire in the long run. And if you obviously don't get what you want in the pre-election period, and you cite what they've said after the election, they're going to be like, wow, these guys are active, they're on the ball, they're not going to go anywhere, they've even tracked what I talked about in the pre-election period. So it's just a really good tip to note what you do get in terms of email responses, tweets or anything like that. So just to reinforce that.
Oh, great. That's great. Carrie, come on in and feel free to introduce yourself as well.
Oh, hi, yeah, I'm Carrie from the Country Trust. So I'm not specifically connected to a food place, that I have been involved with some. It's just a question really for Sustain on the manifesto. I'm quite intrigued that food education doesn't get a mention in your list of wants, because it's kind of the basis to be able to do anything else. If you don't understand the food system and your place in it and impacts, etc., it's quite hard to ask for other things. So I'm just intrigued.
Ollie, would you like to take that from a kind of like a policy space perspective?
Yeah, I mean, we put the manifesto together alongside all of our campaigns at Sustain. Obviously, the children's food campaign, they cover lots of areas, and I think a lot of the areas that they cover are mainly to do with school food and school food standards, free school meals, and then children's healthy food. So we do a lot on junk food advertising, do a lot on soft drinks industry levy. So I think that's our main focus is. We couldn't put everything in there, I suppose. So it was just a sort of prioritization of the issues that we work very proactively on, and what our members as well work on as well. So but yeah, I'll note that, and I can communicate that to obviously Barbara, who leads our children's food campaign, for campaign ideas and things. But yeah, thanks for...
I think, and one thing to add, I'm remembering just in the past few years, we did a piece of work around engaging actually on the Healthy People's Capital Fund, a very short-lived fund specifically for schools, to be able to invest in kind of infrastructure to do food and growing education. So, I mean, just from like having kind of been involved in this work, there's a lot of appetite at the local level to engage young people, but we know that one of the limits is actually like lack of resources at the local level. So whether at the local authority or at the schools level. So we do advocate to make sure that there is local resource to do all manner of engagement, and that it's long-term. But we know that one of the biggest challenges is actually adequately supporting that work at the local level, so that the will is there, but you know, the capacity is limited. So I think that's one way that we kind of connect into it, and that is something that really needs leadership at the national level. But thank you. We have another question. There's a couple of questions actually, I'm gonna. So just a very quick one is, and I had a similar question for you, Ollie, as well. Anna says that they don't use Twitter/X. So what's the best platform for conversation with candidates? So I know we've mentioned things like Facebook Live. So Ollie, what's your kind of take on this?
Good old-fashioned emails, absolutely. You can't beat good old-fashioned email. Absolutely, they'll be monitoring their email inboxes very heavily, so I can't recommend that enough. So yeah, if you're not on Twitter, you're not really missing out, obviously. And you know, Twitter is a good way of engaging, but I would just say emailing. If you really want to, you know, you can phone their office and get to know them personally, or anyone in their campaign team. You can absolutely do that. So yeah, I would say it's not the be all and end all if you don't have Twitter or X.
Would you say is whatever we call it, is X probably the best way to engage with, by and large, with candidates versus say Facebook, or I don't think LinkedIn would be.
Of the social media platforms, I would say X is probably the best. LinkedIn direct messages, I mean, yeah, you can slide into their DMs on Instagram if you want. I mean, there's nothing wrong with that, but obviously it's not the traditional way, and I can't imagine the majority of them will be using the likes of TikTok and Instagram, but you know, some of them will. So I would never write off any of these channels, because you know there are lots of new ways of candidates campaigning these days. And I have seen more TikTok activity this year than normal, obviously, especially those trying to go for the younger vote. So I would never do it on its own though. Don't use a social media platform and don't email. I think that's just a bit of a risk. Email is always the best way, but if you want to couple it up with a social media platform, whether it's TikTok or something, or LinkedIn, then go for it.
I just, in the interest of time, if that's all right, then. So Jennifer posted a question about working with local council members who often sit on local health and well-being boards, and that's influencing local policy. I think it's a really good question. I do invite people, we have a brilliant network here, to kind of respond if that's okay, but I think I will kind of pose questions specifically on this general election engagement. I hope you don't mind if we do that. But just, I think one more question, because this has come up, I think, through Sophie's presentation, and I think one for you, Ollie, as well. In the interest of, because so many people don't have enough time, you know, what would be like one thing that you do, just to reiterate, like if you say have just half a day to devote to this, or what would you do if you actually have zero capacity? What might be the advice to local, whether the food partnerships organizations? So yeah, if you have just half a day to devote to this work, what's the one thing you do? And if you have no time at all, what's the one thing you can do? Do you want to take it first, Sophie? Just, you know.
Sure. I mean, yeah, it is really tricky, isn't it? And lots of us are part-time, and yeah, you know, I'm 2 days a week, and you think, gosh, there's not actually that many working days. I would say, I mean, it probably goes back to what Ollie said about emailing being the surefire, trusted way. I think, you know, rattle off those emails if you can, and then see what comes back. That would be the number one.
Yep, I would, just to take it step by step, I would go into Democracy Club. I would find the candidates in my area. I would find their emails, and then I would use the candidate letter template in the toolkit, edit it appropriately to my food partnership, and ping off that email to the main party candidates. And I think you could do that in half a day. Hopefully the toolkit letters will help you to do that and help you save time. And yeah, thank you, Lily, for sharing that. So I'd get those emails and use that letter to your advantage, and hopefully that's an afternoon maybe, and that's something before the election then.
Thank you. So we're getting short on time, and I want to give you guys a chance to speak amongst yourselves and really think about this through at your local level. So if that's okay, we're going to do quick breakout groups. We're a little bit shorter on time, so I think maybe just 5 minutes to buzz in, I think, as a groups of 3 is what we're planning. So if that's okay, we're going to do that. And I'm going to pose the questions again that you'll be covering. So don't worry. And in fact, what you could do is you could, it should pop up. So you should see there your questions. So your thoughts on the toolkit and the assets, like what could be particularly useful, any plans within your local area to do this, or within your food partnership organization, or interest in engaging the candidates, and any concerns or anticipated barriers. So those 3 things, like what you're kind of really kind of honing in on is useful, your plans, and any potential barriers, if that's all right. So yeah, we'll break out into a group like for 5 minutes, and then we'll come back and sort of see how it went. Hi, everyone. Welcome back in from the breakout groups. I know we don't have a lot of time, so it's just be really great to hear some of the stuff that came up, interesting kind of points. Try to keep it succinct as well, if that's okay. So just go ahead and raise your hand, or just unmute yourself if you want feedback from your group. I can kick it off if you'd like. We can do a bit of a feedback from ours, if that's all right. A couple of interesting things that came up is Helen suggested getting a card ready ahead of time. That's something they're doing, so they can send a physical card congratulating the elected MPs, because an email might get lost, but a card might sit somewhere. So I think that was a fantastic touch and a brilliant suggestion. And And I think the other thing is both of the people in our group have a bit more of a focus on food insecurity and health. So we talked about kind of signposting to wider networks, but also where someone's based on a council, they can still promote the resources to others in their network who are not under PERDA. And of course, they can also, if they're personally involved in a food project organization, they can sort of take away the stuff and share it with the organization they're involved in. So there's just some ways that utilizing people's networks. Yeah, any other feedback?
No, I think that's it. Thank you.
Great. Well, hopefully you guys found that really useful. We do have the survey. We want you to fill it out. We especially want to know what people might be planning. So please do share that with us via the survey, and do include us in if you're putting something online, especially if you're getting responses from candidates, please do contact myself, Ollie, Lily, Sophia, any combination of us or all four. Keep us posted. And I think this is a really important piece of work, both in terms of what candidates pledge to do within your local area. But I think it's really important for us to see really like where politicians are kind of stepping forward and, what's their responsibility to their local constituents and communities and what's their role at the national stage. So I think this is a fantastic exercise. And please do keep us updated. And it doesn't end on the 4th of July, as people have mentioned. So this is a really great way to strengthen that relationship, to keep that conversation going, to engage them on a number of different issues that matter to your communities. And of course, to invite them to the Day of Celebration Action, which will take place on the 13th of November in Parliament. So I think it's been a brilliant session, short and sweet, if you ask me. We could have definitely taken more time. Thanks again for participating, for sharing your questions. And yeah, we will see you at the next Sustainable Food Places and or Sustain session. So please do keep in touch. Thank you so much.